By summer 1945, the United States Navy possessed 563 destroyer escorts, representing the largest single class of warships ever constructed by one nation. These vessels, built with remarkable speed across dozens of American shipyards between 1943 and 1945, now crowded anchorages from Norfolk to San Diego, from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines. Each measured 306 feet in length, displaced approximately 1,400 tons, and had been designed for one specific purpose: hunting submarines in the Atlantic and Pacific. With the surrender of Germany in May and Japan in August, that purpose had vanished overnight. The question facing naval planners was immediate and practical. What does one do with 563 warships that are suddenly obsolete? The challenge was unprecedented in naval history. Never before had any fleet faced such a dramatic transition from total war to peace. These destroyer escorts, known universally as DEs, had cost roughly $6 million each to construct, representing a combined investment of over $3 billion. They consumed fuel, required crews of 186 men each, needed constant maintenance, and occupied valuable berths at naval facilities worldwide. The Navy's Bureau of Ships began calculating the costs of simply maintaining this enormous fleet in reserve. Approximately $850 million annually. With wartime budgets collapsing and Congress demanding demobilization, keeping every destroyer escort in commission was financially impossible. Yet these were modern warships, less than 3 years old on average, with potentially decades of service life remaining. The destroyer escort program had been America's answer to the U-boat crisis of 1942 and 1943. Designed to be simpler and cheaper than fleet destroyers, DEs could be mass-produced using prefabrication techniques and diesel or turboelectric propulsion systems that didn't compete with the steam turbines needed for larger warships. The results had been remarkable. American shipyards delivered destroyer escorts faster than any other warship type, with some vessels going from keel laying to commissioning in less than 6 months. By war's end, these ships had sunk 67 German U-boats and numerous Japanese submarines, whilst escorting thousands of convoys across both oceans. Their success made them valuable. Their numbers made them disposable. The Navy would have to choose which destroyer escorts deserved preservation and which would face the scrapyard, a decision that would shape American naval power for the next quarter-century. The situation in late 1945 presented naval administrators with competing pressures. On one hand, the emerging Cold War suggested that submarine threats had not vanished but merely changed flags. Soviet submarine construction was accelerating, and the Red Navy had captured numerous German U-boats complete with their advanced technology. On the other hand, the American public demanded rapid demobilization. Congress slashed naval budgets by 75%, and shipyards that had produced destroyer escorts now needed to return to commercial work. The Navy faced an immediate decision: which DEs would remain in active service, which would enter reserve, and which would be scrapped or sold. The destroyer escort fleet itself was remarkably diverse, despite its apparent uniformity. 6 distinct classes had been constructed, each with different propulsion systems, armament configurations, and capabilities. The Evarts class, the earliest, numbered 97 ships with diesel-electric propulsion. The Buckley class, with 154 examples, used turbo-electric drive and featured improved anti-submarine armament. The Cannon class, numbering 72, returned to diesel-electric propulsion, but with different reduction gearing. The Edsall class comprised 85 ships with diesel engines. The Rudderow class, with 72 vessels, represented an improved Buckley design. Finally, the John C. Butler class, the most advanced, numbered 83 ships with steam turbine propulsion that made them faster than their predecessors. This variety complicated preservation decisions, as maintaining 6 different types of machinery and spare parts inventories would prove expensive. By December 1945, the Navy had formulated its initial plan. Approximately 100 destroyer escorts would remain in active commission, distributed across both the Atlantic and Pacific fleets. Another 200 would enter the reserve fleet, properly preserved and maintained for potential reactivation. The remaining 263 vessels faced disposal through scrapping, sale to Allied nations, or conversion to other purposes. This decision reflected both strategic calculation and economic reality. The Navy recognized that future conflicts might require convoy escorts, but keeping 563 ships operational was financially untenable. The selection process began immediately, with naval architects and operational planners evaluating each vessel's condition, capabilities, and potential utility. The destroyer escorts selected for continued active service represented the newest and most capable examples. The Navy prioritized the John C. Butler class and later Ruderow-class vessels, which offered the best performance and most modern systems. By mid-1946, approximately 87 destroyer escorts remained in commission, serving primarily with Atlantic Fleet anti-submarine warfare squadrons. These vessels conducted regular patrols, training exercises, and showed the flag in foreign ports. Their crews, now volunteers rather than wartime draftees, maintained the ships to peacetime standards whilst naval planners debated their long-term future. The Reserve Fleet program absorbed 203 destroyer escorts between 1946 and 1948. These vessels were systematically prepared for long-term storage at facilities in Norfolk, Virginia, Charleston, South Carolina, Orange, Texas, and San Diego, California. The preservation process was thorough and technically sophisticated. All machinery was drained, cleaned, and coated with protective compounds. Electronics were removed and stored in climate-controlled warehouses. Guns were preserved with special greases and covered. Hulls were cleaned, painted, and regularly inspected. The goal was to maintain these ships in condition, allowing reactivation within 90 days if necessary. The Navy classified this as the mothball fleet, and it represented a significant commitment to retaining destroyer escort capability even whilst reducing active strength. The disposal of surplus destroyer escorts proceeded along multiple parallel tracks. Scrapping claimed the largest number, with 147 vessels sold to commercial shipbreakers between 1946 and 1948. Most went to yards in New Jersey, Texas, and California, where they were systematically dismantled. The steel was valuable in the immediate post-war period as American industry retooled for peacetime production. Each destroyer escort yielded approximately 800 tons of scrap steel, 15 tons of copper, and smaller quantities of brass, aluminum, and other metals. The scrapping process was efficient but final. These ships, many with less than 2 years of actual service, were reduced to raw materials within weeks of arriving at the breakers' yards. Foreign military sales provided homes for 79 American destroyer escorts between 1946 and 1952. This program served multiple purposes. It disposed of surplus vessels, strengthened Allied navies, and maintained American influence in post-war maritime affairs. France received 13 destroyer escorts under the Mutual Defense Assistance Program, commissioning them between 1950 and 1952 to rebuild its navy after wartime losses. The Netherlands acquired 8 vessels, redesignating them as frigates and using them for colonial defense in the East Indies. Brazil obtained 7 destroyer escorts which became the backbone of its anti-submarine force. Italy received 4 vessels, Greece took 6, and smaller numbers went to the Republic of China, Uruguay, and other nations. The most extensive foreign deployment involved the transfer of 18 destroyer escorts to Japan between 1953 and 1956. These vessels became the foundation of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, established after the 1951 Security Treaty. The destroyer escorts were redesignated as patrol frigates to comply with Japan's post-war constitution, which prohibited offensive military forces. This program proved politically sensitive, as it involved giving warships to the recently defeated enemy, but strategic logic prevailed. American planners recognized that Japan's geographic position made it crucial for containing Soviet Pacific ambitions, and a capable Japanese Navy served American interests. Conversion programs transformed 47 destroyer escorts into specialized vessels serving new purposes. The most significant conversion created radar picket escorts, designated DER, which received enhanced radar systems and communication equipment for early warning duties. 26 destroyer escorts underwent this conversion between 1949 and 1952, emerging with distinctive tall radar masts and expanded operation centers. 12 destroyer escorts became high-speed transports, designated APD between 1945 and 1946. This conversion removed some armament and installed accommodation for 162 troops, along with additional landing craft, davits. 5 destroyer escorts underwent conversion to experimental platforms for testing new technologies, contributing significantly to naval technological development during the early Cold War period. The Korean War's outbreak in June 1950 dramatically reversed the Navy's disposal plans. Suddenly, the Navy needed every available escort vessel for convoy protection, amphibious support, and blockade duties. Between July 1950 and December 1951, the Navy recommissioned 39 destroyer escorts from the reserve fleet. The mothballing process proved its worth, as most ships were ready for sea within the planned 90-day timeframe. The recommissioned destroyer escorts served primarily in the Pacific, escorting supply convoys to Korea, providing gunfire support during amphibious operations, and conducting coastal patrols. However, naval planners recognized that whilst destroyer escorts remained useful for certain missions, they represented increasingly obsolete technology. The post-Korea period saw continued attrition through scrapping, foreign transfers, and conversion. Between 1953 and 1957, an additional 73 destroyer escorts were sold for scrap as the Navy reduced its force structure. By 1960, only 62 destroyer escorts remained in active American naval service. The Soviet submarine threat of the late 1950s prompted one final major modernization effort under the Fleet Rehabilitation and Modernization Program, known as FRAM. 35 destroyer escorts received updated sonar systems, improved anti-submarine weapons, and enhanced communications equipment between 1960 and 1962. The final vessels in American service were decommissioned between 1972 and 1974. Foreign service extended. Destroyer escort careers well beyond their American retirement, with some vessels remaining in the Taiwanese fleet until 1999. Of the original 563 vessels, only 2 survive today. The USS Slater is preserved in Albany, New York, while virtually all others vanished through scrapping or deterioration. Standing before the Slater today, one confronts the mathematical reality of attrition: 563 vessels reduced to a single survivor, representing a loss rate of 99.8%. This near-total elimination occurred not through combat losses, but through the mundane economics of post-war defense budgets and the relentless pace of technological obsolescence.